Open your Bible almost anywhere, and you run into a command that sounds simple until you actually sit with it. Fear the Lord. It shows up in the law of Moses, in the songs of David, in the wisdom of Solomon, and on the lips of the prophets. Whole verses hang on it. The beginning of wisdom, one of them says, is the fear of the Lord. Another calls it a fountain of life. Another says, it adds length to your days. The phrases, everywhere woven through book after book written by people separated by centuries who never met each other. Then you keep reading, and the same Bible, sometimes the same prophet, sometimes the same chapter turns around and says the opposite. Fear not. Do not be afraid. Those words in one form or another run through Scripture hundreds of times. Some have tried to count them and lost track. It is one of the most repeated things God ever says to the people he loves. An angel says it. A prophet says it. God himself says it over and over like a parent studying a frightened child in the dark. So which is it? That is the question almost nobody stops to ask out loud because the two commands sit so far apart on the page that you never line them up side by side. You read fear the Lord on a Monday and fear not on a Thursday, and your mind files them in separate drawers. But put them next to each other and they look like a contradiction sitting right in the middle of the Bible. Fear God. Do not be afraid. The same voice telling you both, sometimes within a few verses of each other. Most people resolve it quietly and without thinking. They decide the scary word must be a mistake of translation. Fear of the Lord, they tell themselves, surely just means respect. Tip your hat to God. Mind your manners. Keep a respectful distance the way you would around a judge or a king. Take the trembling out of it, and the problem disappears. The contradiction dissolves because one side of it was never really fear to begin with. That solution is tidy. It is also wrong, and it quietly robs you of the very thing the verse was trying to put in your hands. Because when you go back to the language the Old Testament was actually written in, you find something that refuses to be softened that easily. The Hebrew word behind fear of the Lord and the Hebrew word behind fear not are not two different words that happen to land on the same English page. They are the same word. Let me show you what that means because it reshapes the whole phrase. The Hebrew sits on a single root, and from that root grows a small family of related words. One of them, yar, is the verb to fear. Another, yirah, is the noun, the fear itself. And when you open the standard Hebrew lexicons, the reference works scholars actually use to map what a word can carry across the whole Bible, you do not find a narrow little meaning waiting there. You find a wide one. The range runs all the way from terror and dread on one end to honor, reverence, and awe on the other. The same root covers a soldier shaking before a battle and a worshiper bowing in wonder. The whole spectrum falls under one heading. This is exactly where a lot of sincere teaching goes off the road. And I do not want to drive off it with them. You have probably heard the popular version that the fear of the Lord never meant fear at all. It says it always meant respect and nothing more. And anyone who hears trembling in the word has simply been fooled by a clumsy translation. That sounds freeing, but it is an overcorrection, and it is not honest to the language. The word genuinely carries weight. It really can describe knees that go weak and a face that goes pale. It is used for the dread that falls on enemies, for the terror of a nation that hears what God has done and goes still as stone. The lexicons keep dread right there in the definition, and they are right to do so. So we are not going to pretend the fear is fake. We are not going to shrink the word down until it fits comfortably in our pocket. The discovery here is not that the fear evaporates. The discovery is what kind of fear it is, and who it is pointed at, and what it does to every other fear you carry once it finally takes its place at the center. It helps to notice where this phrase actually lives in the Bible, because it is not scattered at random. It clusters. It pools heaviest in the wisdom writings, the books that ask how a person is supposed to live well in a world they did not make and cannot control. Proverbs returns to it over and over, treating it as the doorway every other kind of knowing has to pass through. The Psalms sing it. Job wrestles with it down in the dust. These are not the panicked writings of people running from a monster. They are some of the most grounded, clear-eyed books in the whole library, written by people staring straight at the hardness of life and refusing to look away. That alone should slow us down. Whatever the fear of the Lord is, it produced steadiness in the very people who knew the most about suffering. It made them wiser, not more frightened. And that is a strange thing to say about a word we usually treat as a plain synonym for terror. And the Bible does not leave us to untangle this on our own. It sets the puzzle up deliberately in one of the loudest, most dramatic scenes in the entire Old Testament. Picture the foot of a mountain in the wilderness. The ground is shaking. The air is thick with smoke, and a trumpet blast keeps rising louder and louder until it feels like the sky itself is sounding an alarm. The people of Israel have just heard the voice of God speak the commandments out of the middle of the fire, and they are completely undone by it. They pull back from the mountain. They beg Moses to stand between them and that voice. Let God speak to you, they tell him, and you speak to us. But do not let God speak to us directly, or we will die. They are certain standing there that the next word will be the end of them. And Moses answers them with a single sentence that holds the entire mystery folded up inside it. Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. Read it slowly, because it is easy to slide right over the hinge of it. Do not fear. And then only a few words later, that the fear of him may be before you. He tells them to stop fearing and to keep fearing in the very same breath. In the Hebrew, both of those words come from the same root. This is not Moses fumbling, reaching for the wrong word, and correcting himself. He is drawing a clean line straight through the middle of the word fear and showing the people that there are two different things living inside it. One of them, he wants gone right now today. The other, he wants planted deep in them for the rest of their lives. And notice the reason he gives. God has come to test you. Moses says that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. The whole terrifying display, the fire and the smoke and the trumpet, was never meant to leave them cowering. It was meant to leave a mark, to put something before their eyes so weighty that it would steady them long after they walked away from the mountain. He was not trying to scare them into a corner. He was trying to give them a center, a fixed point, large enough to keep them from drifting into the very things that would destroy them. The fear he wanted was the kind that keeps you, not the kind that crushes you. And the strange mercy of it is that the same God who thundered from the mountain is the one who a breath earlier told them not to be afraid. He was never their enemy. He was showing them his size so that nothing smaller would ever own them again. So the question changes. It is no longer whether to fear God. The Bible has already told you to, and told you not to, in the same sentence, out of the same mouth, on the same day. The real question is which fear Moses is putting to death, and which fear he is planting. Understand that. And the contradiction stops being a contradiction. It turns into one of the most practical truths you will ever lay hold of. A quick word before we keep going. If these word studies are the kind of thing you want more of, the most useful thing you can do is subscribe so the next one actually finds its way to you. And if you have ever dropped a comment or passed one of these along to a friend, thank you. It does more than you know to help this small corner of the internet reach people it would never reach on its own. Now back to the mountain and the two fears hiding inside a single word. Go back to the very first time a human being is afraid of God anywhere in the Bible, and watch carefully what the fear does to him. It happens in the garden after the fruit. God comes walking in the cool of the day, and the man who used to meet him in the open now hides himself among the trees. God calls out, "Where are you?" And the man answers, "I heard you, and I was afraid, so I hid." That is the word fear. And look at the direction it pushes him. It drives him into the bushes. It puts distance between him and his maker. It makes him cover himself, make excuses, and run for cover. That is one kind of fear of God. It is the fear of someone who knows he is guilty and expects the blow to fall. So the sight of God sends him backward, scrambling for somewhere to hide. This is the fear Moses was trying to kill at the foot of the mountain. It is the fear that treats God as a threat to escape a danger, to put a wall between yourself and him. And it is the most natural fear in the world for a guilty heart to feel. Now set another man beside him. A father stands on a mountain of his own, a knife in his hand, his son bound on the altar, his chest caved in with grief, because God asked him for the one thing he could not imagine surrendering. And at the very last second, a voice cuts through. Do not lay a hand on the boy, the voice says. Do nothing to him. Now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Same word again, fear. But watch where this one moves him. It did not send him running into any bushes. It held him on that mountain. It steadied his hand and steadied his heart enough to trust God with the thing he loved more than his own life. This fear did not open a gap between the man and God. It welded them together. From the outside, it looked like the deepest obedience a human being is capable of, and the voice from heaven called that obedience by a single name: fear of God. Two men, two fears, one word. One fear drives you away from God and into the trees. The other draws you toward Him and holds you steady when everything inside you is screaming to run. They feel like opposites, and in a sense they are. But the Hebrew files them under the same heading because they grow from a root that English simply cannot hold in one word. We hear the word fear and picture only the man crouched in the bushes. The Hebrew ear heard fear and could just as easily picture the man on the mountain, refusing to let go of God even when God asked the impossible. That second fear, the steadying one, is the fear the Bible calls the beginning of wisdom. And here is the detail that ties the two scenes together. The man in the bushes was afraid of being hurt by God. The man on the mountain was afraid of grieving God, of failing Him, of holding something back from the one he had given his whole life to follow. Those are not the same emotion wearing two outfits. They come from two different places entirely. One is the fear of a criminal in front of a judge. The other is the fear of a son who would rather die than disappoint a father he adores. Both make the heart pound. Only one of them is worth keeping. And once you can see the two of them, clearly that famous line, the beginning of wisdom, finally makes the kind of sense it never quite made before. Because the way we usually hear it is honestly a little strange. If the fear of the Lord only meant being scared of God, then wisdom would have to begin in panic. The wisest possible life would start with the most frightened possible heart. The closer you walked with God, the more terror you would carry. That does not match a single other thing the Bible says about Him. And it does not match how the wise people in Scripture actually live. They are not nervous wrecks, always glancing over their shoulders. They are some of the steadiest, most settled people on the page. David writing songs in a cave. Daniel calm in a den of lions. People with an unusual stillness about them. But read it as that second kind of fear, and the line snaps into focus. Wisdom begins in the moment you take God seriously enough to build your whole life around Him. The moment He becomes the largest, weightiest, most solid thing in the room, heavier than your circumstances, heavier than your worries, heavier than every other fear competing for the throne. That starting point is not panic at all. It is perspective. It is the simple life-changing difference between a person who factors God into everything and a person who has quietly and politely left Him out of the equation. The wisdom books even pair this fear with words you would never in 100 years set beside raw terror. They put it right next to confidence. In the fear of the Lord, one proverb says there is strong confidence, and His children will have a refuge. You do not get that kind of steadiness from something that merely scares you. It comes from something solid you have learned to stand on. The fear and the assurance rise together here because they are both aimed at the same God, the one who is overwhelming and good. At the very same time, that pairing of overwhelming and good is the hinge the whole thing turns on. Hold one without the other, and the fear goes bad. Feel only the overwhelming part, and you get the man in the bushes all over again. Terror, with no trust underneath it. Feel only the good part, the cozy and comfortable part, and you get something soft and forgettable. A God you would never reorder a single afternoon around, let alone a life. Hold the two together, overwhelming and good at once, and you get the thing the Bible has been after the whole time. A fear that is shot all the way through with love. A trembling that has no desire to run. Near the end of the Bible, there is a line people love to reach for whenever they want to cancel the fear of God altogether. So let me put it back where it belongs. Perfect love. It says casts out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. And the one who fears is not perfected in love. Read it quickly and it sounds like the death certificate of the whole idea. If love casts out fear, then surely a mature believer should have no fear of God left in them at all. But slow down and look at exactly which fear the verse names. Fear that has to do with punishment. The fear of someone bracing for the sentence to land. That is the man in the bushes once more. The guilty fear, the kind that expects God to come and destroy. That is the fear love drives out the door. Stand securely inside the love of God, certain of it, and the dread of punishment loses its grip on you, because punishment is no longer what is coming down the road toward you. But that is a very different thing from the awe drying up. The reverence does not pack its bags and leave when the dread does. If anything, it grows deeper because now you are not cowering in front of a judge waiting to be condemned. You are standing in the presence of someone genuinely overwhelming, who has turned his whole face toward you in kindness. The closer his love pulls you and the more astonishing the one you have drawn near to becomes. Love does not flatten the fear of the Lord into nothing. It purifies it. It burns off the terror and leaves the wonder standing tall. And this is the point where the whole thing quietly turns toward Jesus, without anyone needing to force the connection or staple it on. There is a passage that lists the things that would rest on the promised Messiah, the marks of the Spirit that would sit on him: wisdom and understanding, counsel, and might, knowledge, and then this, the fear of the Lord. And the passage does not stop there. It says he would delight in the fear of the Lord. Delight in it. Sit with that for a moment because it settles the whole question. The one person in all of history who had nothing whatsoever to be afraid of, in front of God, no guilt to cover, no punishment to dread, no reason ever in his life to bolt for the bushes, is the very one described as full to the brim, with the brim a 7-2, a fear of the Lord, and not merely carrying it as a duty but delighting in it. That closes the case once and for all. The fear of the Lord at its purest cannot be terror of God because the sinless Son held it perfectly, and it brought him joy rather than dread. What he carried was the other thing entirely: the reverence, the total unbroken seriousness about his Father, a life so completely centered on God that not one corner of it was left out or held back. That is what the fear of the Lord looks like when every trace of guilt has been removed from it. It looks like Jesus. It looks like a son who loved his Father with everything and stood in awe of him at the same time and saw no contradiction in the two. And here is the gift folded inside it. He carried the good fear so completely that he was able to deal with our bad fear on our behalf. He walked straight into the punishment that the guilty fear spends its life bracing for. He took the very thing the man in the bushes was hiding from. The love that casts out our fear then is not some feeling we have to work up on our own strength. It is something he secured for us by absorbing the punishment that made us afraid of God in the first place. The dread gets its answer at the cross. The wonder is what is left standing on the other side. Let me hand you one picture to carry out of all this, and then I want to set it down right in the middle of your ordinary life. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast canyon, the kind where the far wall is a mile off and the floor drops away further than your eyes can even measure. There is a railing at the lip of it, solid iron anchored deep into the rock. You walk up to it, and you wrap both hands around it, and you lean out over all that open emptiness. What you feel in that moment is not one clean single emotion. It is two things braided tightly together. Your stomach drops at the sheer scale of it, the bigness, the way the height seems to shrink you down to nothing, and at the very same time you are thrilled. You cannot pull your eyes away. You want to lean out even further because the railing is holding and the view is glorious beyond words. Take the railing away though, and that exact same height turns into pure terror, and you back slowly away from the edge with your heart in your throat. Keep the railing, and the very thing that should have frightened you becomes the thing you traveled all that way to stand in front of. The fear of the Lord is the canyon. The love of God in Jesus is the railing. Without it, the size and the holiness of God becomes something you flee from, a drop you dare not stand anywhere near. With it, that same overwhelming greatness becomes the thing you press close to and cannot get your fill of. The fear does not vanish when you reach the railing. It changes its nature. It turns into wonder. So what does any of this actually do on a Tuesday, when nobody is standing on a holy mountain or leaning out over a canyon rim, and the morning is just bills and traffic and the same low hum of worry? Here is what it does. Every single one of us is ruled by some fear. We may not name it. We may not even notice it. But it runs us all the same. Fear of what people think. Fear of losing the job, the relationship, the health, the future we had quietly been counting on. Fear of being found out, of not measuring up, of the thing we lie awake at 2 in the morning bracing ourselves against. These fears are not abstract ideas. They steer our decisions. They shrink our courage. They keep us awake. They are loud, and most of them are small, and together they are utterly exhausting to carry. The fear of the Lord is the one fear with the power to put every other fear in its proper place. When God becomes the largest thing in your field of vision, the canyon you are standing in front of, the other fears stop getting the final word. They shrink back down to their actual size. The opinions you were terrified of turn out to belong to people no bigger than you are. The future you were dreading turns out to be held in the hands of the one you have slowly been learning to trust. It is not that the smaller fears all vanish overnight neatly like turning off a light. It is that they lose their throne. Something far greater is sitting in that seat now. And that something, it turns out, is good. Think about how the small fears actually operate. They make promises they cannot keep. The fear of what people think swears that if you just manage every impression, you will finally be safe. And it never delivers because there is always one more person to win over. The fear of the future whispers that if you worry hard enough tonight, you can somehow control tomorrow. And it lies every single time. These fears rule us by pretending to be bigger than they are. The fear of the Lord breaks the spell. It does not do this by telling you those things do not matter. It does it by setting them beside something that genuinely is bigger and letting you see the difference with your own eyes. Next to a mountain, the molehills finally look like molehills. You were never going to argue yourself out of your anxieties. You were only ever going to be freed from them by something weightier moving in and taking the center. That is why the wisdom books keep promising rest on the far side of this fear. Not the rest of a person who has stopped caring about anything, but the rest of a person whose biggest, weightiest fear turned out to love them all along. You stop bracing for the blow because the one holding all the power has come close and called you his own child. The trembling has not disappeared, but it has changed from the inside out. It has become the steady, grounded, almost glad seriousness of someone who knows exactly how big God is and has stopped being afraid of him at the very same time. To fear God and to no longer be afraid of him. That is the paradox Moses planted at the foot of the mountain. And it turns out to be one of the most freeing things a human being can ever learn. So the next time the phrase comes up in your reading, the fear of the Lord, do not reach for the eraser and shrink it down to good manners and polite distance. And do not let it chase you off into the trees, either hiding and bracing for the worst. Let it be the thing it has always actually been. The biggest, weightiest reality there is drawing near to you in love, asking to become the center your whole life quietly turns around. Fear him, and you will find you have nothing else left in all the world to be afraid of. That is not a contradiction that slipped into the Bible by accident. That is the door it has been holding open for you the entire time. If this opened the phrase up for you, subscribe so the next study reaches you and leave a comment. Even one word helps this reach someone it never would have found otherwise. Share it with a person who needs to hear it today. God bless you.